Today is Friday, February 27th, 2026, and our dear friend, Ambassador Chas Freeman, is here with us. Welcome back, Ambassador.
Glad to be with you, Nima. Glad you're back in Brazil.
Please hit like button, helping us reaching more people. And Ambassador, let me start with the negotiations between Iranians and Americans in Geneva, mediated by the foreign minister of Oman. The foreign minister of Oman came out saying that the outcome was positive. They're somehow, advancing in their negotiations. And we had the Iranian foreign minister saying the same thing. Here is what he said.
Very much. Minister, actually, what is your assessment of today's negotiations?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, we had a very intensive, detailed discussion today, and I think we made a very good progress. It was for the first time that we had almost 6-7 hours of talks, both in the morning and the afternoon. It was still indirect, and I'm very thankful to the Foreign Minister of Oman for doing an excellent job, and also to Rafael Garoussi, the Director General of the IAEA, who also played a very constructive role regarding the technical questions. We were able to define the main elements of a possible deal, and we discussed about those elements. Of course, there are still differences, but in most of the cases, we have at least a general understanding how to resolve those questions. So we decided to instruct our technical teams to have a meeting in Vienna, in the IAEA headquarters, and start working on the details of technical questions. At the same time, we had a very lengthy discussion on sanctions, and because the sanctions termination is one of the pillars of any deal. I think altogether it was very good, constructive, and we decided to meet soon, perhaps in a week time, and continue our discussion and go into the more details.
It doesn't seem that you look at the situation right now in the Middle East the way that they're asking. All of these embassies are bringing out their, citizens from Iran, from Israel. The outcome shows something different from what we've heard from the Iranian, for example, foreign minister or the foreign minister of Oman. What is your understanding of what has happened?
Well, first, the framework of the negotiations, which is mostly indirect. Apparently, there was some direct discussion this time in Oman, or I'm sorry, I don't know. The talks were not in Oman, but
it was in Geneva.
It was in Geneva with the Omani foreign minister mediating. The first of all, the objectives of the two sides in these negotiations are quite different and very complex. From the Iranian point of view, Iran is quite willing to demonstrate conclusively that it does not have a nuclear weapons program. It has the right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to enrich uranium, and it is not going to give up that right. There have been indications that in some of the talks, the American side accepted some level of enrichment by Iran. However, these have been contradicted after Stephen Witkoff went back to Donald Trump and also was, of course, he's a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist. He gets instructions from Israel as well as from Donald Trump. So does Jared Kushner, the other negotiator. So I just want to say that, there over the course of time, there have been 4 different objectives stated by the United States. The Iranian objective is, as I stated, they want a nuclear deal. They're willing to show that they do not have a weapons program. But in return for that, they want sanctions relief. And you heard that very clearly from Arakchi in that statement. The United States has wavered all over the place. Nuclear deal, destroy your missiles or we'll bomb you. And if you destroy your missiles and you don't have any means of self-defense, then you just have to trust us, which doesn't make any sense at all. And sever your relations with Hezbollah and with Hamas and with the Houthis and with the militias in Iraq, or else. All of this seems to be very confusing, as you said, and meant to be confusing, perhaps. When I listened to Foreign Minister Arakchi, what I heard was a statement that is quite compatible with a failure of these talks. Because it put Iran in a position where it can say, look, we did everything. We were proceeding positively in these talks. We even reached agreement on some things. And the United States nonetheless attacked us. And as you mentioned, we have the Chinese, the British, and others pulling out of Iran, pulling their personnel out of Iran. We have the Americans and others pulling their personnel out of Israel and Lebanon and so on. So I think the general judgment internationally is that the war is probable, not certain. I think it's very likely. I think, of course, I can tell you as a former ambassador and diplomat that you shouldn't put too much weight on the withdrawal of personnel, because basically this is intended to cover yourself. What would you say if there was a bombing, lots of Americans or Chinese or whoever were killed? How would you explain that you didn't take appropriate cautions when everyone can see that a war is very likely? So this is partly just bureaucratic caution, and you can't make too much of it. But I think there is a general judgment that there is about to be a war. That war is going to be mostly fought from the air, and there's no thought of American forces going into Iran other than perhaps special forces. I don't know. I mean, I recall I was ambassador in Saudi Arabia when we counterattacked Iraq after it occupied and tried to annex Kuwait. The initial attack included special forces going in to disable radar systems and take down communications and so on. So you can't rule this out, but I think basically we're talking about air power, most of it land-based. So Iran is quite well prepared to deal with that, I think, but we'll see.
Yeah. Ambassador, do you really, when you look at the whole situation with Iran, is that the main problem is the Iranian nuclear program, or is something beyond that?
No, that is not the main problem, and the main problem is Israel's desire to eliminate Iran as a competitor for influence or as a potential enemy in the region. Israel wants to destroy Iran. I think, I don't know if you remember the Romans saying Carthage must be destroyed. That's the Israeli line. Iran must be destroyed. I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is that concerned about the nuclear program, although he constantly refers to it. I think that is a pretext and excuse. He knows very well from his own intelligence services, which are first rate, that Iran hasn't been building a bomb. And so he just finds that a useful way of rallying support from the United States and so forth. But, Israel's behavior in other contexts, especially Gaza, and now in the West Bank, is so horrible that a majority of Americans now have more sympathy for Palestinians and Arabs than they do for Israelis, which is a remarkable turnaround. And I think it has something to do with the probable reaction in the United States to any war. We have a vote coming up apparently in the Congress next week to try to reassert the constitutional authority of the Congress to authorize wars. I mean, we are in the midst of an experiment in completely unconstitutional government. Everybody says, well, you know, what happens, only Donald Trump knows what will happen, only he can decide. Well, that is completely unconstitutional. The Constitution divides the authority of a government between different branches of government, and the Congress, unfortunately, has decided to default on its responsibilities. We'll see whether it asserts them next week. The Trump administration doesn't seem to care at all about Congress because it has had a absolutely reliable majority vote from Republicans in both the House and Senate. That is now in some jeopardy. You know, there are all kinds of factors here. You can't get away from the Epstein files, which Donald Trump has every interest in diverting attention from. I noticed that in her deposition yesterday, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton argued very forcefully that Donald Trump needs to be interrogated about his role in various alleged rapes and beatings and sodomy and various other disgraceful behaviors with Jeffrey Epstein. So Donald Trump sees the Epstein files closing in on him. And one way to deal with that is to start a war. This is Netanyahu's technique. You know, if I'm in danger of losing my job as prime minister, I will just up the ante on the battlefield and argue that you can't get rid of me because it's wartime and you need a wartime leader like me. So lots of factors coming in here, but I think they all push Donald Trump in the direction of authorizing a war earlier rather than later. Why should he wait for the vote in the Congress? Well, you know, as long as there's no vote, nobody's going to challenge him directly. So I think we're talking about a war in the next little bit. And I noticed that the British, for example, and the Chinese, in arguing for people to leave Iran, have said, do it now, right away, don't wait. So I think this is very dangerous. And I imagine that it's entirely possible that once an attack is seen to be underway, Iran will counterattack without waiting to be bombed. And I think it will counterattack mainly against Israel because it understands very well where the idea of this war is coming from. It's not coming from the American people or the American Republic. It's coming from Israel and its apparent hammerlock on Donald Trump.
I think, Ambassador, for such a, I think we can somehow, I don't know if what would be your understanding of the role of China and Russia today, and how do you see this attack is coming? They are watching what is happening. How do you see the reaction from these two countries? How important Iran is for these two countries?
Well, I think Iran is important for a number of reasons, some of them geopolitical. Iran has a central location in transportation routes. It's a major oil supplier. It's a classic civilizational state. It has had very deep interactions with both China and Russia over millennia. And so it looms large in their consciousness generally. What they have done is basically try to enable Iranians to defend themselves with better weaponry and technology. So you have the S-300, the S-400 anti-aircraft, anti-missile defense systems apparently provided by Russia. You have the HQ-9, which is the Chinese equivalent of the S-500. S-400 plus provided by China. You have apparently this three-dimensional radar system. I think the Chinese have 3 copies of that. It's mobile, easy to set up and take down and move around. Very hard to hit. And you have now, there's a discussion apparently between Iran and China about supplying the export version of the Chinese long-range anti-ship missile, which would be able to hit an aircraft carrier at probably 400 or 500 miles away. So I think their response to the threat to Iran has been quite clear. I think there's also a symbolic importance of Iran in this context to them, which should not be downplayed. And that is simply that they want a world in which, and I think this is particularly true of China, but I suspect true of Russia too, that they want a world in which sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence are respected. They don't want the world that the United States is now creating, which is completely lawless. They stand for the UN Charter, for international law. And, I think, of course, the Russians have invaded Ukraine after significant provocation, I would say. That is illegal under international law, no doubt. I don't think the Russians wanted to do that. I remember them negotiating at Minsk twice, 2 accords to solve the problem of Russian speakers in Ukraine. They were quite prepared to have Ukraine have relations with both the European Union and themselves. They didn't ask Ukraine to choose. It was the United States and the EU that wanted Ukraine to choose. So I think both China and Russia have a strategic interest in the fabric of international law and order that the United States has jeopardized with its recent actions. And these actions are continuing on a level that is not much publicized. For example, the Chilean cabinet is apparently discussed a deal with China to put in a fiber optic cable that would connect Santiago de Chile, the capital, with the mainland China. And Marco Rubio responded to news of this discussion by declaring that the visas for the foreign minister and others in Chile were suspended. So here you have a vision of the future, the Western Hemisphere dominated by the United States. This isn't even a deal. It's a requirement under Chilean law that if there's a proposal, it has to be discussed at the cabinet level. And so this is an entirely legal discussion. It's been ruled out of order by Marco Rubio. So nobody wants to live in a world where other countries tell you you can't have a fiber optic cable connecting you to someone else. So I think, there is a point here that both China and Russia understand, and that is we are in a period of transition to some sort of new world order. It can't be this kind of thing that we've just seen with the invasion and decapitation of Venezuela, the murder of people in the high seas, the threat to invade Iran for no clear reason. There's been no real explanation of why the invasion would be necessary. In fact, Stephen Witkoff, who I would point out is an amateur at diplomacy, just as much as Jared Kushner's father is an amateur at diplomacy. He's the ambassador to France. And apparently he didn't understand when the foreign ministry summoned him to explain something that he had to go. That is diplomatic practice. And so the excuse is, well, I didn't understand anything about diplomacy. I'm just an ambassador, but I don't understand anything. This is a kind of entrusting national interests through private citizens with no real competence. nobody wants this kind of world either. So Witkoff, Kushner, Jared Kushner, have no constitutional status at all in the United States. And they're not. Their only source of authority is their personal relationships with Donald Trump, not the Senate's approval or anything else. And so this is weird, absolutely weird. And it is not the kind of world that anybody wants. So I think whatever the reaction of China and Russia will be, I think actually going back to the original clip that you showed, as I said, he's setting up Iran to be able to say, if you attack us, you had no justification. And I think that the world will agree with him because there has been no clear justification provided. It's either about nuclear weapons or it's about missiles or it's about protests or it's about relationships with resistance movements or who knows what it's about. You asked the question, what it's really about is Israel's desire to destroy Iran. I don't think anybody agrees with that.
The main point that he's mentioned is that the technical team's gonna meet with each other from Iran and from the United States. It seems that in Vienna, on
Yes.
Monday, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know how much of positiveness can we get by this sort of argument, because you look at what Steve Witkoff is talking about, it seems that every time he goes there, they're talking about something, and that is not reflected in the mainstream media, in the United States, to
That's
inform people what has happened during the talks. We don't know. Our only source is the Iranian part, because they're coming out and saying what was happening. Because we don't get it from the United States, from Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
The United States is fielding a crack team of amateurs with no experience at all. When Steve Witkoff meets with Vladimir Putin, or when he meets with the Israelis, or when he meets with the Iranians, there's no professional diplomat in the room. There's nobody even taking notes. This is and this gets to a major problem in American foreign policy at the moment, which is understood, I think, by many governments abroad. You can't institutionalize, you can't implement a promise if there's no record of the promise and no one from the permanent bureaucracy knows about it or can implement it. We've had this problem in the past mainly because of elections and transitions between different administrations. I mean, I remember the transition between the George H.W. Bush and Clinton administrations. George H.W. Bush had reached an understanding with Pyongyang about a nuclear deal, and the United States promised to establish diplomatic relations with Pyongyang as part of this. Clinton administration didn't know anything about that. And so a month or two into the new administration, North Korea started making trouble. Why? So you said you were going to do this and that, you're not doing it. Well, of course, the Clinton administration had no idea what they were talking about. And this led to a major crisis, which fortunately did not result in a war. Now we're seeing the same thing every single negotiation. Nobody knows what went on in there. And we have a well-established record now of Steve Witkoff appearing to agree with things with Iran, only to rebut the appearance of an agreement. So he says, sure, there can be enrichment at 3+% or 1 something percent or whatever. And then he turns around and says, no, there can't be any enrichment at all. And he says, yeah, we can do a nuclear deal. And then he says, no, we can't unless you disarm yourself by destroying your missiles or stopping the production of them or whatever. And, I mean, it's not clear. Is the United States offering Iran relief from sanctions, the very sanctions that it has employed to create protests on the streets of Iranian cities, and only to manipulate those protests to make them violent. Is that on offer? We don't know. It does look to me, it has looked to me from the beginning, as though these negotiations were once again simply a means of dragging things out and providing a cover for planning an attack. So now we hear there are even more aircraft headed in the direction of Iran, or West Asia, I should say. There are a huge number of tankers apparently in Bulgaria. And there are apparently F-35s at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. I don't know what they're doing there. I thought the Saudis had said they didn't want to be involved in this, but we'll see. And I think the American military are telling the president quite directly and leaking to the press that they're doing so, that this is not going to be any kind of cakewalk. This is not going to be easy. And in fact, the risks of major destruction of US forces, as well as the exhaustion of American munitions, I guess there was supposed to be an original plan. We are told that of our arsenal, of active arsenal of those missiles. So all of that gone at once. The military have to look at other contingencies. What about Taiwan? Suppose China decides that it's time to move on Taiwan. If we don't have any weapons to defend Taiwan, we, obviously won't. Maybe that would be a good thing, but that's not the right basis on which to make such a decision. So this is very complicated, very controversial, and the chances that it's going to go wrong for everybody are very high, in my view.
And we had various polls in the United States showing that majority of Americans don't want this war, more than 70% of American people. And this is despite what's going on in the mainstream media in terms of they're trying to push that we have to go, we have to fight Iran, we have to get rid of this regime in Iran. And here is a clip of Netanyahu arguing for such a long time the main reason of the conflict with Iran.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
No, I mean, there's actually a joke circulating on the internet, you may have seen it, which shows some cuneiform writing on a clay tablet from 3000 BC that says Iran is only a few days away from making a bomb. I was told, now I think, what year was that? 1991. Yes, I was told to go and brief then Crown Prince Abdullah in Saudi Arabia, when I was ambassador there, that Iran was only 2 years away from a bomb. So Iran has been 2 years, 2 months, 1 day, 5 days, 10 days, 3,000 years, whatever, away from making a bomb forever. And of course, this has been the main refrain of Netanyahu. I will just say one other thing. My first visit to Israel as Assistant Secretary of Defense, there was an unfortunate Israeli colonel. I really felt very sorry for him, who was asked to brief me on the Iran threat. And I thought, and it was clear that he didn't believe anything he was saying, but he gave it the best shot he could. And I thought to myself, okay, now Iraq is flattened. You have to find another enemy. So Israel was suffering from enemy deprivation syndrome. That's the sick feeling you get when your enemy isn't there anymore and you don't know which way to punch your guns. And so they invented a threat from Iran. I don't see Iran as having invaded anybody for a very long, long time. Centuries, really. Iran has been the victim of aggression from British-ruled India, from Russia, from Israel, from the United States, from Britain. It's had regime change operations directed at it, the British and the American intelligence services back in the early 1950s with Mossadegh. Where is the evidence of Iranian aggression? I don't see it. Why would Iran want to start a nuclear war with Israel? Israel has nuclear weapons. Everything that Netanyahu says Iran might do, Israel actually did. That is, they produced a nuclear weapon, lots of them, clandestinely. They lied about it. They stole uranium. Anyway, this is mirror imaging at its worst form. I look in the mirror, I say, well, I did this, and therefore Iran must be doing it. But that is not the case. So that is ridiculous. But it doesn't help. For the simple reason that you mentioned the mainstream media. Our mainstream media is Zionist controlled or influenced. You cannot criticize Israel in our mainstream media. Nobody does. You have to go to alternative media to hear dissenting views, and those are usually punished by somebody. So you ask, well, does it matter what the facts are? I don't think it matters at all. I think Netanyahu's narrative prevails. And, Mossad, CIA can tell Netanyahu or President Trump there is no Iranian bomb as much as they want, and he won't believe them, and the public has been brainwashed to believe something else. So there's no way of stopping this. And that is why I think it was really stupid of Donald Trump to put himself in the box that he has put himself in, so that Stephen Witkoff says, well, I'm really perplexed. How come Iran hasn't capitulated when we've made this huge show of force? Which shows he doesn't understand Iran, but he also doesn't understand diplomacy. He doesn't understand how things work internationally. He thinks he's dealing in a New York real estate market, apparently. I think when we had professional diplomats like Bill Burns managing the discussions with Iran, we got somewhere. Now we have amateurs and we're getting nowhere. And their talks, I think, are basically cover for an impending attack. There will be meetings with the technical level in Vienna, in the IAE premises. Maybe they will accomplish something, but as I think I've made clear, I don't think the nuclear issue is the main one. I don't think any solution on the nuclear side, restoring the JCPOA, I don't think that would do anything. And of course, Donald Trump, having torn up the JCPOA, can't really politically restore it.
Julian Assange once said that the public opinion all around the world is not interested in wars. So you have to buy people into war. That main tool for that is the media and how media can play out in that sort of agenda. Do you think that the media is doing their job to make it possible? Because when you look at the polls, I've mentioned the polls, the majority of the people in the United States, they don't want this war. And how?
No, I think people are in the United States do not want any war anywhere, and do not want another forever war, which is what we've been conducting with Iran, basically. And I think the administration and its main figures, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, gloating about having brought down the Iranian currency and provoked the protests. I think people look at this and they're disgusted for the most part. There are always some people you can fool, but I think the majority of the American people understand there's no real rational reason for doing what we apparently are about to do. So, are the media doing their job as warmongers? Yes, they are. Who dominates the media? Zionists. Should we be surprised that the Israeli line is purveyed by the American mass media? No, we should not be. You can't, as I said, whether the Zionists themselves are controlling the media or simply influencing it, it doesn't matter, because the media will not allow any non-Zionist viewpoint to be openly expressed. So Israel has the ability to control the narrative. They have a whole ministry called the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, which does that very effectively. I think as propagandists, they are unparalleled. They have control of the media in the United States, in Australia, and in other places. Can we find out what the truth is? Not very easily.
If Donald Trump decides finally to attack Iran, which it seems that all the evidence shows us that he may attack Iran in 2 days, 3 days, or I don't know, in the next week. But when you see Donald Trump going that far, this is, one would argue that this is one of the most serious wars that the United States is going to make in the aftermath of World War II, because this is a huge country. It's not something so small to be ignored. It's a huge step on the part of the Trump administration.
Well, we Americans have been in the habit of fighting people who have no air force, no air defenses. Same is true of Israel. They can act as they will in their region because there's nobody with the ability to resist them. We've been used to fighting people, Afghan insurgents, Iraqi insurgents. When we conducted the Gulf War of 1990 to 91, we had a vastly larger ground force. We don't have anything like that at present. We really don't have the ability. People say, well, there won't be a ground attack on Iran. That's correct, because we don't have the ability to conduct one. And of course, it would be stupid anyway. I think just this doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Ambassador, when we talk about how the people in the United States were against the war, but Politico has reported something interesting, that maybe it could be a better strategy if Israel attacks Iran, then the United States join Israel. That may help to change
that strikes me as complete nonsense. It is basically, I took it as an indication that the Trump administration finally has figured out that they have a dilemma they can't get out of. But there is a fundamental misunderstanding or misstatement, completely wrong presupposition in this story, which is that if Israel attacks Iran, Iran will retaliate against the United States. No, it won't. It will retaliate against Israel because, again, it knows where the impulse for this war is coming from. If the United States attacks Iran, Iran is going to retaliate against Israel. It will also retaliate against American forces. But that will be the secondary target. The primary one will be Israel, and for good reasons. I mean, the reason Iran is living in an insecure neighborhood, the reason the region is unstable, is Israel and its activities. So from an Iranian point of view, going back to the point that up to now, Iran has responded to limited aggression by Israel and the United States with limited, it has limited its responses, mainly to a symbolic level. So the United States murders General Soleimani, and there's a symbolic attack on an airbase in Iraq. The United States joins Israel in bombing Iran in June last year, and there's a symbolic attack not designed not to kill anyone on Al Udeid airbase in Qatar. No, not anymore. Iran has learned the hard way what this is all about. It is about an Israeli effort to bring Iran to its knees and preferably destroy it. And therefore, a limited response is no longer regarded as appropriate. And as far as capitulation is concerned, Iran is a very proud country. And the Romans spent centuries trying to get Iran to surrender, and they failed. And this is not going to happen now either. And the idea that somehow or other by bombing people, you will encourage protesters to take your side rather than defend themselves and their country is preposterous. All of this has a kind of, if you don't believe that we're living in an irrational nightmare, you should watch the State of the Union speech, because that was, it would be funny if there weren't evidence of complete mental disorganization. And the fact that the Congress Republicans sit there and applaud all this shows you how far we have departed from rationality and from our constitutional traditions. I think this automatic support for insane policies is unraveling, but it takes a while. We'll have an election maybe at the end of the year. Donald Trump is trying to stop that. I don't think he can succeed. There will be all sorts of efforts being made to disenfranchise people, prevent them from voting, take over the voting at the federal level, so Donald Trump and ICE, his personal Gestapo, can direct it. That's not going to happen. And there are still some honorable Republicans, and of course the Democrats will not cooperate in this.
And Donald Trump is talking about the friendly takeover of Cuba. Just the video came out. He said that, what is that? How that could be friendly takeover of Cuba? I'm not even sure if the Venezuela case is going to be that successful that he's trying.
No, I don't think. I don't think we know how successful that's going to be in the end. I suspect it won't be successful. And when Marco Rubio does things like the thing that I mentioned he just did with Chile, I think he thoroughly discredits American influence. I think this causes everybody in South America to reach for their gun, not to surrender to American dictation. Cuba, yes. No, I think there is no support at all outside South Florida and a few other places for this policy. Here, the media really can play an important role, as that is the alternative media. They have shown what is happening in Gaza. So Israel can lie until it's blue in the face and say, nothing to see here, go away. You can't get in, or if you do come in and you're a journalist, I'll kill you, so you can't report. But nonetheless, people have seen exactly what is happening, and they can't be fooled. What is happening in Cuba is absolutely criminal in terms of impoverishing Cubans beyond the level of poverty they have. You know, I recall as a boy going to Cuba from the Bahamas. It was the most prosperous Latin American country at that time. You know, the system in Cuba is very, very counterproductive. I join Cubans in wishing it would be reformed. You know, I mean, there is the example of China, which had top-down reform and very successfully. Where's the Deng Xiaoping in Cuba? We don't see him. But you know, you're not going to be able to reform Cuba with another Bahia de Cochinos, a Bay of Pigs invasion. Not going to happen. So this doesn't make any sense either, and it's very cruel.
Yeah. Ambassador, shifting the gear a little bit to what has happened in Israel, we had the Prime Minister of India going to Israel. It had, you know, he said something there. It was so much outrageous for many people that it was a lot of repercussions in the in the social network. You see all these platforms, they're talking about Modi and what is India under Modi. When you see Modi is a political figure, we have to understand that. And we have the moral part of what is happening with his visit to Israel and the political part. What is your understanding of Modi's visit to Israel?
Well, Israel and India have been evolving in similar ways. They were both democracies. They were both secular. They have now become religiously inspired dictatorships. The cabinet in Israel is full of fanatics. And what they have in common is Islamophobia. They are both very Islamophobic, and they are both engaged in acts of violence and cruelty. In India, it's the Kashmir issue, but it's beyond that. It's religious communal violence in various parts of particularly North India, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, the main northern provinces, states. In Israel, we're seeing in the West Bank, nobody's looking because attention is focused elsewhere, but they are busily expelling lots of people, murdering lots of others. It's not as bad as Gaza, but it's getting there. So they have a lot in common. And India is Israel's biggest arms market. So there's a lot of trade. When India blew up its first nuclear weapon, I was in Delhi right after that. I was in Islamabad and Delhi trying to figure out what was happening and what people were thinking. And in India, I discovered that this explosion had been basically promoted by scientists and engineers, not politicians. And nobody had really thought, well, if we produce a nuclear weapon, what's our nuclear doctrine? How do we use it? They didn't know. So they sent a team to Israel to learn from the Israelis. So this cooperation has been going on for a long time. And of course, Israel is very concerned not just about Iran, but about Pakistan and Pakistan's nuclear weapons. And there's some evidence that Israel and India cooperated to try to stop the Pakistani nuclear program. And they failed some years ago. Israel is also concerned about Turkey, another Islamic country. So Israel and India have become soul brothers, but the way in which they've come together is pretty ugly in my view.
Because you've mentioned Turkey, and looking at the foreign policy of Israel vis-a-vis, the new relationship with Cyprus and Greece, and trying to improve in the relationship, it shows somehow Israel, the government in Israel, the policy in Israel is to get closer to other countries instead of being, it's a wise attitude to be closer to your neighbors instead of finding other countries outside of your zone.
Well, this is nothing new. I mean, in the case of Iran under the Shah, Israel courted Iran. There was a very good relationship between Israel and Iran because Israel wanted Iran behind the Arabs, on the other side of the Arabs, causing trouble. Then, of course, as Israel became more powerful, it began to beat up its neighbors, and it didn't need Iran anymore. Now it wants to get rid of Iran. If it does get rid of Iran, it will try to get rid of Pakistan. If it gets rid of Pakistan, it will try to get rid of Turkey. I mean, it's all out there. Just listen to what Israelis say about their ambitions. So this is a country that, well, let me make a clear point here. If Israel claims to be a Jewish country, if Judaism is defined by Israeli behavior, then it is an evil religion. And I have a lot of Jewish friends. They do not believe in doing what Israel is doing. So Israel is discrediting the religion that it professes. And I don't think Hindus get any credit or earn any credit for Hindutva, meaning a campaign against Islam in the name of Hinduism. This is religious prejudice and religious warfare, and the world does not need it and does not want it. And I know, it really is quite absurd. We have, Islam has produced various movements that are highly objectionable. The Taliban, for example, Daesh, the Islamic State. Israel is in the charge of people who might as well be the Taliban or Daesh. They're Jewish, they're not Islam, not Muslim, but they're behaving in exactly the same way, killing people for no reason. And now, of course, Taliban and Pakistan are at war, which is another problem. I know that China's again offered to mediate, but I don't know how that's going to go. I don't see an easy end to that. And this is another problem left over from history by the British, who drew something called the Durand Line right through the Pathan or Pushtu people and divided the Pushtu or the Pathan into two states. And there's Afghanistan has never really accepted the Durand Line. So there's perpetual conflict. And of course, it's not accidental that India is just beefing up its embassy in Kabul. And India, of course, is stirring up the Taliban to go at Pakistan from the rear. So there are geopolitical games being played that really have nothing to do with the United States, but these are great power games. Israel's not alone in trying to divide people in order to rule them. My hero historically is a fellow named Belisarius. And Belisarius was a Bulgarian who was co-opted into the Byzantine Empire, and he served the Emperor Justinian. He was a brilliant general. He was the creator of the modern Foreign Office, the first foreign ministry. He was the creator of the first modern espionage system. His policy was divide and rule, and he probably gave the Byzantines 400 years, 4 centuries that they didn't deserve. They might have been overthrown long before the Seljuk Turks arrived and Mehmet II took Istanbul. So I think Constantinople at the time. So this is nothing new. It's statecraft 101, but it is extremely violent and unpleasant for anybody subjected to it. And it really has no moral justification at all.
I think Zionism, Ambassador, is something multidimensional to understand it, because we have atheist Zionists,
It's not a religion. It's an ideology. It's a nationalist ideology, which is why it isn't Judaism. It's quite different. And, I don't think Daesh is Islam either. So this is why I say, and I don't think these fanatic Hindus are true to the Hindu tradition. I don't see many Buddhists who are quite so bad, but I note that the Buddhists in Sri Lanka are not kind to the Hindus in the north when they had a civil war. So nobody seems to be exempt. You're living in Brazil and you have a neighbor called Paraguay, which has a terrible history. I hope you have read it. If you haven't, you should. At one point in the 19th century, they had a dictator who simultaneously declared war on Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Bolivia. And at the end of that war, 9 out of 10 Paraguayan men were dead. And women had to share husbands because there weren't enough men. Oh. So they did it again in the 1920s. But this time, Standard Oil promoted the war. And again, they got, they lost the Chaco to Bolivia. So people can be incredibly stupid. I think we're in one of those moments again. Unfortunately, the people who are being incredibly stupid now have nuclear weapons and the world's most powerful military. I think after this war with Iran, to go back to your point about we haven't had anything like this since World War II, at the end of this war, the US may not be the superpower it once was. Even if we win, we will have depleted our supplies to such an extent that we'll be greatly weakened. If we lose, we will be humiliated. We'll have the problem with aircraft carriers will not be the plumbing, the toilet's not working, which is quite something. You're an engineer. Would you design a system where if one toilet is broken, all of them are broken? Somebody did something stupid. There are 5,000 or 6,000 people on that aircraft carrier. And they're human. They have to defecate. So they had to go to Crete in order to go to the bathroom. This is ridiculous. But one of those huge ships, if it is sunk, is going to be a big blow. That ship, the Gerald R. Ford, has been at sea for 11 months. That's why the toilets are broken. That's why everything is breaking. And the morale of the crew is breaking, because it's just totally ridiculous, unfair to separate someone from his family and ordinary life for 11 months at sea for no reason. So anyway, I think there are many problems with what is about to happen. And it is not going to end well for anyone.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Well, I'm always happy to talk with you, Nima, but good God, what a situation we are in. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, you have a great weekend, and perhaps I'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you.